Okay, everybody, welcome. And we're in for a real treat this morning. David Kennedy is a really, really great facilitator and practitioner of sacred medicines. There's a huge wave of psychedelic research being done in the United States today, clearing post-traumatic stress and many other things. And then there's the whole higher spiritual path with that. And it's the new term is entheogens, which David will be doing part two on, which means the God within, their spiritual connection. And as he talked about last time, this goes all the way back to ancient cultures. They've been working with this, and finally, the United States is recognizing the value of this and not putting it with the other horrible drugs that it got classified with earlier. So David is he's sold 500,000 books. He's a feng shui master. He's a practitioner of Kundalini yoga, Qigong. He practices, he's an NLP master, and he's really gone deeply into Hindu, Buddhist, Taoist, and Tantric traditions. So he really brings a wealth of, information to us. And the other thing I will say is he and his wife, Jackie, are amazing guardians and facilitators for sacred journeys. So with that, David, I'll turn it over to you.
Wow, Tim, thank you so much. Is my audio coming through okay?
Yeah, we can hear you just fine.
Okay, awesome. I'm beyond honored and thrilled to be here and just feel the love and the connection that's in this field. I mean, you guys are absolutely amazing and it's really tangible. Um, yeah, I'm just thank you for who you are, what you represent, and everything. It's just somebody's was it Jonathan's computer blew up and my computer is blowing up. So there's some strong energy going on here. So we're on plan B here. We're on the second monitor. So bear with me if there's any technical difficulties. But we're just going to carry on and do this. Uh, I think a lot of you were here before. Maybe there's even more people that weren't. But we're just going to do a continuation of the presentation we did before, but also a bunch of new stuff as well. So I'm going to share the screen here to facilitate that. Okay. All right. Tim, can you see a
We
slide that
can
says
see it, yes.
Entheogen?
We can
Okay, all
see
right.
we can see your
Okay.
screen.
Okay, very good. So where we left off last time, we were talking about the whole topic of ego dissolution and the full release experience, and we'll get back to that. Um, we'll circle back and touch on that because it's really kind of the capstone of some of this uh, amazing material. But we're going to take some time right now to talk about the brain science, the neuroscience of how this all happens inside of us when we take one of these substances. So the basics of neuroscience here. Neurons communicate via neurotransmitters. Everybody here knows this. These little chemical messengers that go between, these are two neurons here. So there's a one neuron and they don't touch each other. They have a space in between called the synaptic cleft. And so when they want to communicate, they send these little messengers called neurotransmitters, and then they fit into what's called a receptor on the other neurotransmitter, and then they activate that neurotransmitter. So as you sit here within 1 second, that's happening literally millions of times, and that's what creates your awareness and runs the liver and pumps the blood and so on. So what entheogens or psychedelics do, and we'll use that term interchangeably today, is they act like neurotransmitters. They're not neurotransmitters exactly, but they act like it. And in other words, they can fit into these receptors. And so that's why they work. and they activate certain brain receptors on certain neurons. And many receptors are affected by psychedelics. And the main psychedelic effects, just to kind of put a gloss on things, there's other ones, but the main ones are via the serotonin receptors. So the chemical name of serotonin is 5-HT for short. So the one of the key receptors in the whole psychedelic experience is the serotonin 2A or 5-HT2A receptor. So this is one of the big things that's happening in the brain is that receptor is being targeted by the entheogens, along with many others. Okay, so where is this receptor located? So most of these receptors are in two areas of the brain. The first one here I want to point out is called the transmodal association cortex. So this is the area, and also the primal visual cortex. Now, both of these areas were the ones that were the most evolutionarily developed. If you compare our brains with chimps, we know we have larger brains than chimps do, even though we have 98% of the same DNA. So we have larger brains. And what grew with these two areas, the transmodal association cortex and the primary visual cortex, are the main areas which are here and then back here at the back of the brain. Those are the two that kind of grew out in the evolutionary journey of our species over thousands of years. We didn't descend from chimps, but we descended in a similar fashion, Darwinianly speaking. So the transmodal cortex here, I want to talk about for a second. So this is the area connected in with something called the default mode network. Okay, so the default mode network is the one that keeps us in our current state, and that includes the sense of self. That includes who I think I am. That's the default network. And so, along with the lateral prefrontal cortex. So, those areas are what we're connected in when we think just our daily assumption of I am who I am. This is what's going on. I'm this body. I am this mind, and so on. That is the default mode network doing that. And so that's also the area that enables abstract reasoning and us to even think, oh, okay, I am like a self. Okay. So the serotonin receptor we're talking about is highly located in these areas that we're talking about. Okay. All right. So what happens with this neuron when it's being activated by an entheogenic substance? Okay. So if you look at this diagram here where it says basal, this is just a neuron being stimulated. There's a spike and then it goes away very quickly. But when that neuron is in a petri dish along with LSD, it's stimulated and goes away, but then it actually continues to be activated for a while. So what the psychedelics do is they make the neurons hyperactive and sensitive to inputs, and that is very important. Okay, because the increased activity of neurons leads to increased neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity is a word which means we're opening up the brain to change. We're opening up the brain to be able to become wired differently so that you can actually transform, evolutionarily speaking. You can have personal evolution because of this key concept of neuroplasticity. So what it is, the definition of neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to create new connections or strengthen existing ones. So neuroplasticity is absolutely essential for learning and memory. Everybody in this circle is interested in evolving themselves, growing further, learning, trying new things, becoming a more compassionate, higher person, higher being, serving the planet. Your purpose statement is just ringing with these kinds of things. So for these kinds of things to happen, for you to grow and change, to learn, neuroplasticity is absolutely required. That is what happens when you transform. It's also vital for recovery from injury, adapting to new experiences, being flexible in your thought and behavior. These are all wrapped up in this concept of neuroplasticity. So this actually happens directly on the neuronal level, right when you take an entheogenic substance, it happens right then. It happens in the first hour, second hour, and third hour. Your brain is literally physically changing. I'm going to show you that right here. So these are neurons in a petri dish here. And this is a regular neuron, nothing is happening to it. The DOI is a psychedelic used in research, which has been derived from mescaline. They applied that to the neuron, and now it has more dendral spikes. With DMT, far, far more. And then with LSD, also similarly. And another version of this is that you look at the picture here, and this is the dendrite when it is just underneath the placebo. But under these psychedelics, you can see that there has been all these spikes that have been created just within an hour or two. Okay. So the brain is actually growing and changing and putting new, it's growing. It's like physically growing. And we're going to talk about how to actually make that growth be long term, because that's the key. All right. So when the brain, this diagram here is a picture of the different regions of the brain, like the auditory and the visual and memory and sense of time and sense of self and so on. So under placebo, this is how many connections are being made. So the strongest connections are made within the actual regions themselves. The regions are talking to themselves mainly, and they're talking a little bit to the other regions. But what happens under an entheogenic experience is that there's massive cross-regional connection, which doesn't happen unless you're having, for example, a dark retreat experience, or you're going through some very incredible near-death experience, or a mystical high of some kind, or on a potent entheogenic substance. Then you're going to get massively more, like dozens or hundreds of times more cross brain connection, and that leads to the possibility of change. So basically what happens in the entheogenic experience is that your system right now is under a certain level of homeostasis. Okay, that is what keeps you going. When you take the entheogenic substance, you're actually creating on purpose, maybe you knew it or maybe you didn't, you're creating entropy. You're creating a chaotic experience. You're creating brand new things happening. Clouds of new associations are going out throughout the brain, and there's new possibilities. When things are in homeostasis, that is not growth. So we're purposefully injecting something very powerful into the system. It upsets the apple cart, for 20 minutes or 6 hours or 12 hours, or sometimes a day and a half, whatever it is. But then you come back and you're a new person, and the brain starts to actually gel again in a new reality, a new state. And the same as the personality. Okay, so this here is a record here of how on both microdoses and macrodoses, we can see here that this is a time frame here of 1 hour up to 6 hours, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 30 days. And each dot here represents a study, an animal or human study. So these types of effects are continuing after density of synapses of brain material is present after a day, after 3 days, 7 days, and even 30 days. The rate of brain growth is being shown after 1 and 3 days. You're getting an upregulation of certain genes. There's increased brain density neurotropic factor, which is the brain increasing its growth, and other things are happening as well. Okay, so, all right. So that is just some of the basics of what's happening actually when there is an entheogen going on. And now I want to segue over and talk about the difference between the agent that I talked about quite a bit last time, which is 5-MeO DMT, and also DMT. Okay. For those of you that weren't there that may or may not know, I'll just briefly say that of the different entheogens that are out there, for example, some of the main ones, classically speaking, are psilocybin and LSD, and mescaline. Those are three of the kind of core ones. People have now very, I think, correctly thrown MDMA into the psychedelic box, which I think makes a lot of sense. Even though most people don't have visions on it, that's fine. And also, there's ketamine being worked with dramatically, and even very high doses of cannabis can be psychedelic. But when we come to the short acting tryptamines, okay, there's two that really, really stand out, and those are DMT and 5-MeO DMT. So let's talk about those because some people, I think, have confused the two, but they are actually different. Even though they're chemically related, they're very, very different. Just like you can be related to your sibling, but you can be very, very different. Okay, so DMT is dimethyltryptamine, and 5-MeO DMT is 5 methoxylated dimethyltryptamine. Okay, so they're both based on the tryptamine molecule, but one has some extra stuff that creates a very, very different experience. So we're going to talk right now about what are the similarities and differences. So DMT, I think everybody here has heard of ayahuasca, I'm sure. And many of you have experienced ayahuasca, I'm sure of that as well. And so ayahuasca is a combination of a certain leaf, Psychotria vidris, and classically speaking, in the Amazon jungle, combined with another plant, so-called the ayahuasca vine or vine of the soul. Those two being put together so that they can create a brew and drink it, and therefore the DMT will be orally active. And for a while, the pharmacological scientists thought that there was one active ingredient in ayahuasca, which was the DMT, and the other one was the MOAI inhibitor, meaning it would inhibit the enzyme in your stomach, which would cancel the DMT, and then thereby allow you to have a 4 to 6 hour spiritual experience with the shaman, healing you and so on. But now we've realized that the vine that is used also has its own psychotropic effects on its own, but combined, it's actually what's called telepathine for a while. It opens you up to other realms and dimensions. It doesn't seem to be very psychedelic on its own, but it is highly psychotropic as well. So DMT is found in hundreds of plants and animals throughout the world. It's very, very common molecule. 5-MeO DMT is not as common, and it is found in some seeds that are found in Caribbean islands and Central America and also in South America. And these seeds are called yopo, according to the traditional language. And so what they will do is grind up these seeds and then actually blow this ground up powder into your nasal cavities. I don't recommend this because it's quite painful and unpleasant, but they've had a long tradition of doing this, and you can actually go on a 5-MeO DMT journey with this type of seeds being applied to you. And then recently, around 1980, it was discovered that the special toad, out of the hundreds of 280 toads we know of worldwide, that many of them have poisonous secretions, but only one of them, the Bufo alvarius toad, also known as the Colorado River toad, is the one that in its secretions, it is featuring this 5-MeO DMT molecule. So if a dog bites this toad, the dog will probably have a very short acting psychedelic journey, but then it can die because these secretions also have within them some cardiotoxins. However, when it is smoked, these cardiotoxins are burnt off, so humans are not absorbing them, but we are absorbing the ones that affect our psyche, that affect our sense of self, that affect our consciousness. So I'm going to spend just a brief period of time talking about the similarities and differences between these two molecules because they are quite similar and quite different. Both of these molecules are in your body right now. They're both circulating around. They have not been verified to be found in the human brain, but they have been found in the liver and in the blood and in the spinal fluid and so on. but you are actually, these are natural substances that you have in you at this moment, both of these. When they are taken in a purpose by humans to actually have this experience, they're both short acting. The experience can be quote unquote over within 20 to 30 minutes, sometimes longer. It can vary between 5 and 60 minutes, but 20 to 30 minutes is a good signpost. They're both extremely, extremely intense uh, um, experiences, and they both have a virtually immediate onset, meaning that in the classical situation of inhaling a vapor, that even as you're inhaling it, as you're drawing in the initial breath, the experience is already starting. So it can start within what feels like immediately. Technically, maybe you would say 5 or 10 seconds, 20 seconds, and so on. And they both, when a high dose is taken, they feature a loss of external awareness. Now, you're not losing awareness. You are somewhere else having a very, very aware experience. But what you're losing is experience of your situation, of the room. You're losing awareness that there is a body. You're losing awareness that there's a Jonathan or a Carolyn or a David or Mary Olson, Kelly. You don't maybe even know that you ever did exist as a human in this. So you're, all of that is gone, and there's just pure awareness. So we're going to talk about awareness of what. So these are some of the similarities. These are common to both of these. We can call these for short acting tryptamines, short and very potent. So these are some of the differences here. So for DMT, the key receptor is the 5-HT2A receptor that I was talking about. Now and that is highly associated with the visual aspect of the brain. With 5-MeO DMT, the key receptor is the 5-HT1A receptor, also a serotonin receptor, but that one is more associated with the loss of the sense of self and just a complete melting into just boundaries being gone. Okay. So we mentioned the default mode network, the network that keeps us like kind of on the level, like, here I am, this is what's going on, I'm me, you're you, basic realities are these basic realities. That's the default mode network that's doing that work. So the action of these psychedelics is to actually suspend for a time the action of the default mode network. This is actually very, very healing, because for us to make a change in our life, something has to give away, something has to change. So for the default mode network to go offline, then the brain can do a tremendous amount of cross regional type of action and healing. The key chakra involved with the DMT is the sixth chakra. We'll explain why in the next cell here. And then for the 5-MeO DMT, it's more of the seventh chakra. Sixth chakra being involved with a vision and all types of connections and dreaming and so on. The seventh chakra, experiences of unity. So what are more of those experience characteristics? For DMT, it's otherworldly, alien contact or contact with the Divine Mother. When you are taking ayahuasca in a ceremonial context, many, many people report being visited by, for example, a snake full of wisdom, or alien helpers, or the grandmother of ayahuasca coming and applying healing or giving you messages or singing to you and so on. So you have connection with beings, realms, dimensions, often a very strong visual element that's connected with this 5-HT2A receptor, and lots of content. On DMT, there's plenty of stuff to connect to. Even if you don't remember that you're David or Tim, you're still very often interacting with something that often feels much realer than real. So a common experience on DMT is I dropped this false reality of being a human on planet Earth, and I actually contacted something much more true and real, which is this other realm. Now on 5-MeO DMT, it's very different. Okay. Instead of having all this content to connect to and people, entities talking to you and giving you all these healings and so on, that is usually not present. There's always exceptions, but usually on 5-MeO DMT, it's more of an experience of unity, of the universe, God, infinity. Now, you may not be able to even form the concept of the word God, but when you come back, then you're like, oh my God, that was God. Okay. Pure being, Brahman. And there's little to no visuals, or if there's visuals, it can be just incredibly strong, pulsating white light or something of the sort. But there's usually not, uh, for example, someone, with 10 arms coming up and talking to you who's purple and has, the key to how to get into special doorways and so on and so forth. Um, uh, I think both of these substances are incredibly healing and incredibly powerful and beneficial for humans. And I think one of the reasons why I'm not a neuroscientist, but I think one of the reasons why they are both incredibly effective and short acting. And they also, both of these substances also have no, Tim, maybe you can help me out here. There's a word for when you take, for example, psilocybin or LSD or mescaline on Monday, a strong dose, and then you take it again on Tuesday, you won't have as strong of an experience. There's a word for that. I can't think of it right now.
Yeah, it's
But
like it's sort of like habituation or something.
right, right. So your system needs a while to clear out from it on many of the psychedelics. So with DMT and 5-MeO DMT, that does not exist. Okay. You at 10 a.m., you could have the full 100% experience and then be done with that an hour. At 11 a.m., you could do it again, zero habituation. You could do the full experience again for an hour. At 12 p.m., you could do the full experience again for an hour. So there's no habituation at all with either of these substances. So my belief is, my amateur, non-neuroscientific uh, opinion that I've made up is that because these are both native to the human system, that they're friendly on your system, they clear through the system faster, and they have very few negative side effects and tremendous amounts of positive effects, which we will talk about as well. So, what is the recommended approach to these two substances? This is very brief, and we could talk for hours about that. But for DMT, it would be courage and just willingness to just go somewhere else and see something new and be open to it. And then for 5-MeO DMT, the recommended approach is absolutely full surrender, because it's a medicine that is wanting to take over, wants to eliminate you. Okay. Then just awareness is left. Okay. We're all very clear here that the local you, or the adult trained ego, if you want to call that, is not the same as awareness. Awareness is the true you. And so this part of us that we, this operating puppet that we go around and frequently think that we are, that's eliminated. So when that's eliminated, that's called ego dissolution. With DMT, that is possible. With 5-MeO DMT, it's highly likely that that will happen. So the 5-MeO DMT is the substance within the entheogenic pantheon that this ego dissolution experience is most likely to happen. And we're going to talk in a minute about why that is important. It's not for everyone, okay? Bungee jumping and hang gliding and parachuting isn't for everyone. But it is available, and many people are benefiting from it. It has helped me as well tremendously. So just to summarize all of this, the cliff notes, DMT is connecting you with the alien and the other, and that is tremendously beneficial. However, I would say that if I had to put 5-MeO DMT down to two words, it would be training for death, which I think is very important because it happens once, and it's kind of our it's our graduation ceremony. So um, this is a way of actually preparing ourselves for that ultimate experience, which is coming whether we want it to or not. Okay, so I'm going to talk now about so what? Like the real issue is not uh can you have rocket blast super experiences? That was great. That was awesome. Okay, that was it. That's not the issue, is how great the experience is. The real issue is, as far as I'm concerned, because my life and work is about transformation for the long term, how does this change your life? How can we turn states into traits? So what is it going to do for you? I mean, a lot of people took lots of drugs in the 60s and 70s, and some of them had huge transformations from those substances, but then some of them did not. Some of them, well, that was just an experience that didn't change their life very much at all. Okay. So what's the difference? Okay. So there have been studies on the synthetic 5-MeO DMT or the toad secretions that contain it on people experiencing it. So I want to talk about some of the results of those studies. Okay. So basically what the studies are showing is that, let me go back here. Uh, People are reporting reductions of depression, anxiety, and stress. And this is from using it one time. Okay. As well as an increase in mindfulness and life satisfaction. And these results are being found 24 hours after and 4 weeks later, and also 6 months later. So, what we're talking about here is something that is not available in the pharmaceutical pharmacopoeia, guys. Doesn't exist. What am I talking about? I'm talking about a substance where you take it one time, and then 24 hours later, you feel better on key metrics on a scientific psychological study. Great. Okay, 24 hours later. But then in 4 weeks, you feel even better. You've still only taken it once. 6 months later, you feel even better, and you still have only taken it one time. There is no medicine in Western medicine that does that. You take it one time, and your benefits keep increasing over time. So that is would be called a miracle if they could make a pill like that where you took it once. First, they wouldn't sell it maybe because you would only sell it once, or maybe $10,000 pill. But if they did sell it, everyone would take it. Okay. All right. So here's one of the key takeaways here. Why am I talking about peak experiences and ego dissolution? What is the point? It connects directly to this long-term life change that I'm also talking about. The brain becomes plastic, meaning flexible. New dendrites are being formed, and they are growing within 1 day, 3 days, 4 weeks, and so on. But guess what, guys? It's a two-edged sword, the neuroplasticity. It will either connect you to new experiences, or these new growths will wither away and you'll return back to how your brain was. So, what is the difference? The difference is what you do with yourself in the key periods of time right afterwards, the 3 day period, the 7 day period, and the 30-day period. If you take a very strong dose of one of these substances for 4 days, for 3 or 4 days, your brain is at the same state as a 10-year-old. Okay. You may not know it, or you might look out, everything seems brand new like it was when you were 10, or you may not recognize it. So, what you do during those periods of time is very important. This is the burgeoning field now of entheogenic integration work. How do we actually carry this forward so this creates long-term healing, long-term taking on of new beliefs, long-term loss of previous limits and problems and depression and so on? So the integration work then is that you actually meditate on the experience. You journal about the experience. Often in these type of experiences, even with the 5-MeO DMT experience, you receive what people now call downloads, or very powerful insights that feel like, wow, I should really pay attention to this. I should do X and stop doing Y. I should change belief A and take on belief B, or whatever. Okay. So if I'm talking about the 5-MeO DMT and you are in unity with Brahman and don't even know who you are and can't even think of the word God, then how are you getting downloads? Okay. The reason that is possible is because the 5-MeO DMT experience has three parts to it. The first part is the onset, which I've described as being extremely rapid. So we could just sit here and say 5 to 40 seconds. Okay. So that's the first part. Then there's the actual full release experience itself, 5 to 20 minutes. You may not be able to form a thought during that time. But then there's the third part of it, which is as you start to come back into awareness of the room and the body, and oh, there is a Jonathan, and I'm connecting with you right now, Jonathan, and feeling your wonderful heart energy. So thank you so much. I hope it's okay that I mention your name. Um, as you start to come back from that, then there's a 20 to 30-minute period where you are still very, very strongly affected. You would be, as they would say, in the community, still tripping balls. Okay. But you're starting to become aware of that there is a room and there's a me, and the ego actually, you can actually see the ego start to reform, which is a very instructive process, actually. You can see the things going click, 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 click. You can see the actual reconstruction of the important, but not everything, constructed self. Okay. You can see that actually being reconstructed as you sit there. And that period of time is when the so-called downloads happen. That is the time when you very often will receive tremendous insights or instructions, not necessarily from a being, but they just occur to you. Oh my God, I have got to, this is so important. I've got to, write that book, or, break out contact with X person, or, whatever it is. Okay. So back to why I spent time talking about the ego dissolution and the maximum neuroplasticity. Here it is. Participants in these reported studies who experience higher levels of the ego dissolution, the stronger the mystical experience, the further the ego dissolution was on a scale, okay, they are the ones that had higher reports of increased life satisfaction, more peace, more equanimity, and less depression, anxiety, and stress, and so on. So the point is that this peak mystical experience, the strength of it has been in many, many studies now. It's bearing out that this is the case. It's correlated to the strength of the life changes afterwards. And these are not necessarily people that took great attention to have an integration coach and, for 3 days, spend an hour or two meditating on the experience and journaling and even drawing a collage and doing all these integration work, which is very important if you want it to be longer term. These people didn't necessarily do that. Okay. You still get the increasing benefits over time, but how to maximize the benefits is to take attention to your own integration. Okay. All right. So we've already covered that. Okay. So let's just go into a few numbers here. Okay. For people who had a psychiatric disorder, okay, they used the 5-MeO DMT one time. 79% of them reported reduction in PTSD, 77% reduction in depression, 69% reduction in anxiety, 63% substance abuse problems. I know many people that after they took the 5-MeO DMT without an intention to change habits, bad habits fell away in the following weeks. And they just remember, oh, I was binging on chocolate before I took 5-MeO DMT, and I haven't even bought it in 3 weeks. That's weird. I haven't even been thinking about it. Okay. Okay. I don't want to start an attack on myself. Chocolate's great. Okay. But just an example. All right. Whatever it is. Obsessive compulsive disorder, 53%. And only 2 to 10% reported that these conditions were worsening for them. Again, there is no substance that you can buy in a pharmacy that can do anything like this. Okay. This doesn't make it a magic bullet. This is not for everyone. The entheogens in general. Okay. Let's move on here. Tim, do I have until the hour or do I have 10 more minutes?
Yeah, you have, yes, we have until 10 of, so you've got 10 more minutes.
Okay, all right. So I think I've made the point very well about all of this. And what I'd like to do right now is to play a video of to explain to you what this is actually like. So this is Stanislav Grof. Um, let me see here. I'm going to need to share sound, optimize for. Okay, I think most people here know who Stan Grof is. He is one of the biggest researchers of psychedelics in the history of mankind, psychologically speaking. He's a psychiatrist from the Czech Republic, now an American, and he's written, I don't know, 20 books or whatever. He's a big guy in psychedelics. He knows the landscape. He did studies with hundreds or even thousands of people on LSD before it was outlawed. He developed holotropic breathwork and so on. So he is now going to be talking about in Czech language with English subtitles his experience of his first 5-MeO DMT journey. So here we go.
Můj první zážitek byl smetoxid DMT, kdy já jsem nevěděl, který to dávkování bylo.
Sorry, guys. I need to try to make it louder.
We can see the little closed caption stuff because he's speaking in a foreign language anyway, David.
Okay,
Better
yes,
if
thank
it's softer because then we can focus on the words.
So,
The words
softer,
are below.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you for your input, everyone. Very helpful. All right.
Tam ten jeden muž, který to měl k dispozici, přišel do Esalenu a říkal mě, že má tuhletu látku k dispozici, jestli chci zkusit. Já jsem řekl ano. Já jsem snad několik vteřin, 2-3 vteřiny potom po té druhé dávce do té nostrily, kde jsem naprosto ztratil kontakt s tím okolím. A normálně, když mám nějakou psychedelickou látku, tak si najdu místo, nějaký pohodlný místo, položím se. Tady to vůbec nebyla otázka, kde budu, jak budu. Tam jsem prostě ztratil okamžitě to prostředí. Ty lidi, co tam byli se mnou, říkali, že jsem tam dostal sedět jako socha, teda s tou dýmkou. A ten zážitek byl, že jsem se ztratil nejdřív tak nějak kontakt s tím okolím v tom Esalenu, potom jsem měl pocit, že jako Kalifornie se tak nějak vzdaluje planeta. Mý jméno Stanislav Grof nedávalo žádný smysl. A potom několika vteřinách snad jsem se dostal do situace, kde se mi zdálo, že celá existence byla soustředěna v tím neuvěřitelně silným takovým zdroji světla. A přitom jenom ten název světlo ani není přiměřený k tomu. To je daleko proti toho zážitku, který jsem měl ve svém první LSD sezení. A v kterýmkoliv sezení potom, včetně 1200 mikrogramů LSD. Tam se neobjevilo nic z mýho života, tam se neobjevilo nic z archetypálních oblastí. Tam všecko se soustředili do toho jednoho zdroje světla, kde jsem měl pocit, že to je celá existence v takové abstraktní formě. A bylo to daleko za jakýmikoliv protiklady, jestli to je božský nebo jestli to je ďábelský. Jako všechny polarity byly překročeny a nebylo možné tam k tomu udržet žádný odstup. Jsem se v tom ztratil a stál jsem se tímhletím celou existenci v naprosto kondenzované abstraktní formě. Já jsem to popsal ve své knize When the Impossible Happens, když se stane nemožné, kde jsem to říká Secret of the Toad of Light. V Americe, v té jihozápadní Americe, tam je církev té žáby, teda ty ropuchy, tomu se říká Church of the Toad of Light. Tak já jsem říkal tady tomu tajemství toho Buffo Alvario, že? Pak, když se začal ten zážitek jako odeznívat, tak jsem měl pocit naprostý extaze. Měl jsem pocit, že se tak nějak vracím z toho stavu, ale když jsem poprvé se nějak dostal do vztahu se svým tělem, tak jsem měl pocit, že umírám, že to tělo umírá, ale nedostal jsem se do toho v tím normálním stavem, že od života ke smrti, nýbrž stavu za smrtí, teda do těla, který bylo umírající. A potom za nějakou dobu jsem dostal pocit, že teda neumřu, že to přežiju ten stav. A pak jsem tam byl jenom asi po hodinu tak nějak v stavu extaze. A pak jsem se dostal do stavu, v kterým bych chtěl žít normálně. Trvalo asi týden, kde jsem byl v situaci, kde jsem mohl dělat naprosto normálně jakoukoliv činnost. Ještě jsem pracoval v té době na edici své knihy, kde jsem byl schopen jako naprosto přesně redigovat. A přitom jsem ležel na terase nad mořem a svítilo slunce. Já jsem si řekl, na chvíli si odpočinu, zavřel jsem si oči a během několika vteřin se zase byl v tom stavu, kde jsem se naprosto rozplynul. Že jsem mohl jako přecházet plynule z normální aktivity do toho extatického stavu. A pak nějak jako ty problémy toho života jako se vrátily. Nedokázal jsem to teda udržet víc než ten jeden týden, ale byl to daleko nejsilnější zážitek. Já jsem prožil snad aspoň 150 těch velkých dávek LSD, psilocybin, ketamin, celou řadu dalších těch psychedelik, ale tohle bylo daleko nejsilnější zážitek. Přestože to byl obrovský zážitek, ale bylo to, zanechala to ve mně jako velikou úctu k tomu. Jako metafyzicky na podobný úrovni je, když člověk prožije tomu se říká void, pocit ty kosmické prázdnoty, kde jako má člověk pocit, že tam není nic konkrétního, nevidíte nic konkrétního, ale máte pocit, že tam nic nechybí. Tam jenom pocit obrovské energie, pocit obrovské inteligence a představa, že tak nějakým způsobem z té kosmické nicoty existence se může vynořit.
All right, so in the final minute here, I will share with you, I have two case studies, but there's just time for one. So Henry, these two names have been changed to protect confidentiality, but this gentleman that I worked with was a longtime practitioner of Advaita Vedanta, Mahayana Buddhism, very intensely. He was actually a teacher of Advaita and very, I believe, an awakened individual and very, what can I say, super sincere spiritual seeker, and had experienced some entheogens before. And when he had his 5-MeO DMT experience, it was very similar to what Stan said. Typically, when people inhale it, they're sitting up, and then, after it starts to come on, they lay back or we lay them back. He just sat upright, frozen, and went away, and different things happened and so on, but mainly he just laid there still. But the point is that when he came back, he had been with students of Nisargadatta and students of Ramana Maharshi and high lamas and so on, and benefited from all this, really, really followed these teachings strongly. When he came back at the end of the short retreat that he was in, which we facilitated, he said, "I'm finished now. My search is finished. My questions are answered. I can die now. And I know I have my final question is there's no more questions. It's all taken care of now." And that was immensely gratifying to experience, because he came to the experience with tremendous sincerity, and he wasn't someone who was in deep questioning or seeking or whatever. He was a finder, not a seeker. But whatever remaining shred that was there was evaporated by the power of the experience. And of course, this is not the same that happens to everyone. And what Stan said does not happen to everyone. This is, I selected it because it's absolutely remarkable. But I think that concludes what I have to say today. And I'm scheduled to come back on January 10th. And that whole session will be discussion and Q&A about the topics that we went over in the first session last month and this one. So I'm very honored to have been here.
Hey.
Thank you guys so much.
David, thank you. That was just outstanding.
Thank you so much, David.
Yeah,
That was incredible.
just outstanding. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording now here.